What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the new cards for Ishizu Ishtar from the upcoming Pyroxene Duelist pack in the OCG. Now, people were obviously underwhelmed when these cards were announced, especially because I think there was this expectation of like Gem Knight support, and we might still be getting Morphtronic / Power Tool support in this Duelist pack, as not everything has been confirmed, but I don't think anyone had Ishizu on the dartboard of things we were expecting to get. And I kind of understand why. Most of the Ishizu support that we've gotten over the past couple of years has been underwhelming at best, with a few new cards in one of the older Legendary Duelist set that didn't do much of anything and were just nowhere near viable in 2020 Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is when they were announced. But I want to bring a different perspective to the table taking a look at these new cards because I think they might actually have some real potential. We're going to go ahead and jump right into the video, but the first thing I want to mention as we do is the Archetype Vernalizer Fairy, which is coming out in an upcoming side support set, and they're all Earth Fairies that are designed to work both within their own archetype, with copies of themselves, and with other Earth monsters in general. They have abilities that allow you to turn some of your other monsters into Vernalizer Fairies, allowing them to get the benefits of certain effects, and they have decent searchable synergy. Looking at just Forest and Awakening, you can send an Earth monster from your deck to the graveyard and then special summon an Earth monster from your grave. So you can kind of look at the weighing, balances of how these effects might work and kind of think about the future as it pertains to these archetypes and whether or not they have some real potential to see any play. Now, we're going to do a video talking about the Vernalizer Fairy archetype in detail. I was on a hiatus when that was announced, as many other cards have been as well, and I just wanted to mention it here in case you are unfamiliar that when we're looking at these new cards, keep in mind that they do synergize really well with some other new stuff coming out that people are definitely hyped on. With that being said, though, let's take a look at the first one, which is Aigido the Ancient Sentry, obviously a retrain of Aigido back from Dark Crisis, and right off the bat you can see it's obviously better because it's not based on rolling dice when it's destroyed by battle. But this one says if it's sent from hand, if a card is sent from hand or deck to the opponent's graveyard, you can special summon it from your hand. Then you can special summon a different level 4 Earth Fairy monster from your graveyard. Pretty solid, doesn't negate the effects or anything, so you can combo off without any fear. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the grave, you can send the top 5 cards of each player's deck to the graveyard. Then if Exchange of the Spirit is in the grave, you can send the top 5 cards of either player's deck to the grave. Meaning you can make you and your opponent mill 5, and then if Exchange of the Spirit is in grave, you can mill an additional 5 cards. This is obviously meant to sort of fuel Exchange of the Spirit, but I want to point out the Vernalizer Fairy that we just showed. You can discard this and a monster, and then mill Aigido from your deck directly, and make both players mill, and that's just one way to get your combos started. One thing I dislike about this card is the fact that in order to special it, you need to have a card sent from the hand or deck to your opponent's graveyard, meaning it's very much reliant on the opponent and isn't exactly the best first turn starter. But if you combo it with some of the other cards that make the opponent mill, you are able to start laddering into some bigger monsters pretty quickly. So just keep that one in mind as we go along. Keldo the Possessed Statue is definitely a stronger card overall as a level 4 Earth Fairy. You can discard one other Earth Fairy monster, special summon this card from your hand, then add one Exchange of the Spirit or one card that mentions it from your deck to your hand. That would include, of course, Aigido, because it directly mentions it, but some of the other support as well. And this can actually search another copy of itself, although I don't know why you'd want to do that all that often. Quick effect, you can banish this card from your field or grave, target up to 5 cards in any graveyard, shuffle them into the deck. Then if Exchange of the Spirit is not on your field or in your grave at activation, you can only target up to 3 cards. So you can put back 5 or 3, you can manipulate the graveyard, use this as a disruption if the opponent's trying to revive stuff or playing some kind of graveyard-reliant deck, and it doesn't banish them, which in this case, when you look at cards in the meta, such as Tri-Brigade, Invocation, things like that can interact from the banish zone and or the graveyard, it's actually kind of a nice tool to have access to shuffle those things back in. Plus, you can shuffle your own cards back if you need to, although I don't know a lot of scenarios in which that would be all that great. So overall, it's an extender and a searcher that allows you to pay for the card you're discarding to grab that and maybe set yourself up for other combos, and just comes together nicely as a solid piece of support. Now, Medora the Cessus Oracle is a level 4 Earth Fairy monster, obviously a retrain of Medora from Ancient Sanctuary. The original Medora just gained 100 attack for every monster in the graveyard, so it wasn't exactly anything crazy. This one says you can discard one other Earth Fairy monster, special summon this card from your hand. Then you can place one Gravekeeper's Trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone. Quick effect. You can banish this card from your field or grave, then target up to 5 cards in any graveyards, shuffle them into the deck. If Exchange of the Spirit is not on your field or in your graveyard at activation, you can only target up to 3. So it does have that same restriction that Keldo does, being that you need Exchange of the Spirit in grave or on the field to be able to really maximize its secondary effect. But again, it's an extender that discards an Earth Fairy and allows you to special it, and then Gravekeeper's Trap is one of the new cards that we're going to get to in a moment, and I'll tell you why it sort of works out that you have the ability to search that for relatively low cost. One of the other things I do want to mention, though, as we go through this video here, is some of the other support cards that are worth keeping an eye on. Thrawn the Disciplined Angel came out in Lightning Overdrive, and when it did come out, people were like, well, this is a neat effect, but we don't really have any Earth Fairies to utilize it with. So Thrawn is just an extender that can special itself from the hand if a Fairy Earth monster is sent from your hand or field to the graveyard. A decent extension to be able to go up into different things, to be able to kind of ladder and further your combos. Just another solid piece of support that has some potential depending on where these cards go and realistically where the Vernalizer Fairies go as well. Next up, we've got Blast Held by Fate, of course, a retrain of Blast Held by Attribute, and it's actually pretty solid, it's just kind of slow for the modern game. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy one monster your opponent controls with the highest attack. If you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's original attack. So it's like a Magic Cylinder and Sakuretsu Armor in one, I suppose. Then, if Exchange of the Spirit is not in your grave, you take damage equal to the damage your opponent took. So, obviously, again, the drawback being you're going to take damage here, but if you're playing the deck the way it's intended, you know, Exchange of the Spirit's going to be in grave, and you have ways to utilize that. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target one level 4 Earth Fairy monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use each effect of this card once per turn. So, one of the things that comes to mind, of course, is using things such as Foolish Burial Goods. You can send this and get an Earth Fairy monster back, but let's not forget we just talked about Aigido and his ability to mill stuff, meaning you can go ahead and send the trap from deck to grave by milling, and your other cards are able to put it back so you can continually utilize its effects and really maximize the resource generation that you're getting off of it. It is a hard once per turn, understandably, because that burn damage can stack, and more importantly, the recursion can stack, and, you know, you can really start to pop off. But it's a cute card. I definitely think it's one of the weaker pieces, but you'd probably want to play it as at least a one-of, so that you have the ability to, you know, get something out of the cards that you end up milling. And as we said, Exchange of the Spirit is definitely going to be part of the win condition of this deck, but I think that's kind of easier said than done, and you definitely want to look at other options within the deck too. Now, Medora the Cessus Oracle, obviously being able to get Gravekeeper's Trap means we need to take a look at Gravekeeper's Trap. But before that, we have Exchange of the Heart. This is a normal trap. If you control 3 or more Earth Fairy monsters, send as many monsters on the field as possible to the graveyard. Then each player can special summon to their field a number of monsters from their opponent's graveyard, up to the number of monsters that were sent to their opponent's graveyard by this effect. Then, if Exchange of the Spirit is in your graveyard, you can set one trap directly from the deck. So there's a lot of effects going on here, but basically, you're going to go ahead and say you control 3 Earth Fairies, send as many monsters on the field as possible to the grave, then you get to special summon from your opponent's graveyard equal to the number of monsters they sent, and they can special summon up to the number they sent. So the monsters you're sending off your own field really don't matter all that much. The whole objective here is to be able to take the opponent's monsters, and then you get to set a trap directly from the deck. It's not that great, honestly. It's very reliant on a lot of things, including you controlling 3 Earth Fairies and then having them stay on the field, but there's potential to search any trap from the deck, so that's definitely something to at least keep in mind and consider. It's definitely decent. I don't know whether or not this is going to be something that the deck would actually utilize, but it is food for thought and something to consider when you're looking at these new cards, but I mean, it's understandable that there would be some underwhelming support here too. Now, Blast Held by Fate, Exchange of the Heart, both really good, but Gravekeeper's Trap definitely feels like the best one. While Exchange of the Spirit is in your graveyard, your opponent cannot activate card effects in the graveyard or special summon monsters from the graveyard. You can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn. During the main phase, you can discard one card, add one Gravekeeper's monster, or one Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand. That's really solid. I mean, Gravekeepers are a little slow nowadays, but being able to search them if they do get more support, this might be something that will pop up at some point. And then it does have an additional effect that states during your opponent's draw phase, before they draw, if this card is already face up on the field, declare one card name. Look at the card your opponent draws for their normal draw, and if it is the declared card, send it to the graveyard. So the first thing that pops into my head with this card, of course, is Convulsion of Nature. This is a really cute interaction that I just thought about, and if you're able to set this up and somehow get Gravekeeper's Trap active before your opponent goes, you can lock them out of drawing each turn. You see the deck, so let's say they're going to draw Forbidden Droplet, you declare it, they draw it, and then they send it to the graveyard, so on and so forth. So it's a cute interaction with a card like Convulsion of Nature, where basically if you have the proper way to set this up, whether it's using like Temple of the King or Maki or the Destructor, you can lock your opponent out of draws, assuming they don't have the main deck Spell and Trap out removal. And a lot of times people don't, like depending on the format and stuff, they're not very heavily played, so it is something to consider. But this just does a whole lot. Locking the opponent out of graveyard card effects and special summoning from the graveyard is like an alternate Necro Valley, as long as you have Exchange of the Spirit engraved, which you're obviously going to play in this deck, but you could get it engraved with something like Foolish Burial Goods to really set you up going forward. But think about the number of things this stops and the number of plays that it opens up for you. This is a really, really good card. And even without that secondary effect of declaring a card name and comboing it with things like Convulsion or other things, you could build something cute like playing Convulsion, playing Mind Crush, playing other things, and try some niche, weird deck. But this is just a really good card in general within this deck, because as long as you're playing Exchange of the Spirit, you can floodgate out like half of the deck strategies in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's definitely something that's powerful to have. So I'm optimistic about Gravekeeper's Trap, especially because Medora can bring it out directly from the deck, which is how you get it face up on the field. So again, if you guys, just for whatever reason are confused by what I'm saying, Medora, you discard an Earth Fairy, special summon it, and then you place Gravekeeper's Trap from your deck to your hand. It is a 3-card combo, but if you have Medora, Convulsion of Nature, and Gravekeeper's Trap, you're locking your opponent out of graveyard effects and being able to disrupt their draws before they even get a chance to play, which is a really useful thing. Not to mention, Medora can't actually be negated on field because its effect activates in hand, so you discard, and then as long as that's good, you special it and immediately search the Gravekeeper's Trap, similar to how Gamma brings out Driver and so forth. So they'd have to negate it in the hand, and you're opening up, a lot of other things going on there. So this is a really, really cool interaction, and it's kind of funny to think about because Convulsion of Nature in general is just a decent, cute card that's never had real practical application aside from being, a ruling nightmare in some scenarios. So, yeah, Convulsion of Nature, Gravekeeper's Trap is definitely the coolest, interaction here. But overall, these cards are really solid in terms of potential in the future. I really think the Vernalizer Fairies might be the best way to utilize these, and even Medora himself being able to get Gravekeeper's Trap out immediately with Exchange of the Spirit engraved, if you can make this work in a way that you're able to set this up, and I'm sure you'll have those people that are labbing this and working on things that'll be able to get it better than me just reacting to them on paper, but it seems like a really neat sort of scenario for us to have going forward. And I just wanted to point it out because I think as a whole, this set of cards for Ishizu is a lot better than what it could have been, and people are being really quick to criticize it without thinking, long term about what it could do. You obviously have cards like Zolga the Prophet, too, which is an Earth Fairy that's an extender that allows you to, look at the top 5 cards of each player's deck. So this combos with Gravekeeper's Trap as well, because you know what your opponent's going to draw. And it's kind of something neat to keep in mind from King's Court. It felt very random the way it came out, but it's just another card I wanted to point out, it synergizes with a lot of these cards. So, what do you guys think? I know I was a little bit all over the place here. I was trying to get my thoughts out, all in one take as I recorded this and kind of reacting as we go through. So do you think these cards have some potential? Do you think maybe they're right to be kind of yeah, these are bad? Or do you kind of fall somewhere in the middle? Let me know what you guys think. If you liked the video and the discussion, please hit the like button and subscribe, or at least consider it. Hit the bell icon so you're notified of new videos, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.